What's wrong with Wicker Basket?
She's sad because she lost her littlest pet shop collection when she was 12.
Oh dear.
And she stubbed her toe this morning.
The pain she must be in.
That's why she's decided to enslave all of humanity and make her troubles everyone else's problem.
That seems like a reasonable enough reaction to those trivial events.
I just feel so bad for her.
Death to all who oppose me!
This and more on Love Try High.
So I recently read a webtoon called Serena. It sucked! And it was an infuriatingly boring comic about how to be a professional victim, where our main character Serena gets everything and anything she's always wanted, treats her family, lovers, and pretty much everyone she comes in contact with like total garbage. But it's played off and accepted because she has a tragic backstory and is kinda sickly. You know who else had a tragic backstory? The Ugly Duckling. Something I tend to notice in webtoon comics recently are the staggering amount of victim protagonists and the utter need for the authors of these comics to make us feel bad for their characters without doing much more than give us a sob story about their characters' pasts, leading people to wave off some morally corrupt behaviors from these victim protagonists because they have a tragic backstory. Whilst reading Serena, I found that she is the perfect amalgamation of this common occurrence, with even the author trying to backtrack how terrible her actions are halfway through the comic. So why are these victim characters such a common occurrence in webtoons, and why are they bad in the context of a story? While reading a webtoon, you'd be pretty hard-pressed to find a comic that doesn't at least have one character with a tragic backstory in it. Seeing as how that's an author's favorite part of writing a story most times, without realizing that you need more than just sugar and eggs to bake a cake.
Sugar, spice, and everything nice. These were the ingredients chosen to create the perfect little girl. But Professor Utonium accidentally added an extra ingredient to the concoction, Chemical X.
Trauma and tragedy are great for drawing readers into a story and getting to understand a character, but often, more times than not, the story will use these things as an excuse for a character to act like a shithead and get away with things a normal person couldn't. You know your younger sibling that can get away with anything and everything because they're the baby of the family. They don't know any better. They're the baby. But they're like 18. Yeah, it's exactly like that. And what's worse is the fact that other characters will usually accept these behaviors because Mary Sue's mom died, and Mary Sue will never have to face repercussions for her actions. While it might be just a character in a comic, writing like this is pretty unbelievable as a reader. Just because your life sucks doesn't mean you get to be an asshole to people.
This is my dream house. It's Barbie's dream house. It's not Ken's dream house, right?
Right, as always.
Let's take Serena for example, because I read a lot of this comic, but it was too boring for its own video, so here we are. From the very beginning of this comic, we're told that she's evil, with Serena herself even agreeing with the sentiment. She walks around using her lover as a prop with no regard for his feelings, using weird girl boss intimidation tactics to terrorize people she sees as below her, as well as acting like a straight up child when she doesn't get her way on something, making everyone else's lives around her miserable. All because her parents died tragically and people asked her then to grow up and take on responsibility. She doesn't, by the way. On top of that, she's a little sickly and has been forced into a loveless marriage to save her family's hotel. That actually sounds pretty bad. You know, I have a cousin that was just like her, and also her leg was bitten off by a pack of wild dogs, so she acted like a jerk, and it totally makes sense. She acted. While having your parents die is a traumatic event, no doubt, it doesn't give you a free pass to then for the next 5 years of your life treat people like trash or props. They are still people too. Serena's character can boil down to her being a bitch because she no longer has parents and is kind of sickly and forced into a weird marriage that does actually benefit the hotel she says she loves. While a lot of those events are interesting to hear about, they don't then equate to Serena being an interesting and engaging character. The author forgot to have have Serena actually doing anything about the trauma and tragedy they have, so rather, they just gave Serena more trauma and tragedy to have the audience have to feel bad for her, making one of the longest pity parties in webtoon history. At least, that's how it felt to read Serena. It's not that long of a comic, but it's horrendous. If you want another comic that does this, She's Hopeless is another bad example of a victim character, where the main female character gets bullied for being rich, and wait, that's it?
Oh, boo-hoo! Let me play a sad song for you on the world's smallest violin.
Gabin, our main female lead, is made a target of a lesser high school because she wasn't smart enough to get into the rich people high school. Initially, everyone was somewhat welcoming of her, but she apparently acted like everyone else was below her because of her wealth, leading people to then start to bully her. We get shown that Gabin also bullies the bullies back, creating a never-ending pattern of bullying in the school. Except Gabin's bullying is taken to such an extreme that she causes more than just bodily harm or emotional damage to her classmates. While a bully will trip Gabin, she will then insult them and give them disfiguring burns to keep them from coming to school. While a bully might alter her school uniform to the point where she can't wear it to class, she then makes it the entire class's problem by cutting up everyone's school uniform to shreds. She is shown to sling insults at people who have her best interests in mind and single them out, causing more harm than was caused to her in the first place. Hey man, all I can say is if this comic were happening in America, it would be a lot shorter. Gabin is more ruthless than her bullies, but because she's a victim, it's played off like we should care about her when we're given nothing to actually care about. She's not sympathetic, she does nothing to productively help herself, so why should an audience even care? I guess she really is hopeless. I had a girl in my high school creative writing class. In this class, we would have to read things in front of everyone that we had written over the week. The first time this girl stood up, she read a poem about how dark and depressing her life was and how she struggled to cope with it. Instantly, when she sat down, she was swarmed by a lot of the class feeling bad about how she felt, and liking the poem because it was well written, and we also now had a better understanding of our friend. Leading our friend to then, for the rest of the school year, write and present more dark and deep and edgy poems about how terrible her life was, with diminishing return from her classmates. The more she tried to make us have sympathy for her with her increasingly dark poems, the less people would comfort her after she was done reading. No one likes a victim for too long, specifically a victim that doesn't do anything to fix their situation. Because while it does absolutely suck to have a shitty life, it shouldn't define who you are as a person. The reason I bring up this story is because a lot of these stories on Webtoon forget to then have characters actually do anything about the life that they are living. Being a victim isn't wrong, but when a comic or story only has a character that's caked with traumatic event after traumatic event, it can get pretty repetitive to an audience. While we are all inherently human and something terrible is bound to happen to us at some point of our lives, most people recognize that the trauma they faced isn't what defines them as a person and go forwards. Webtoons usually try to tell a realistic human story about actions a real person would do, but victim webtoons of this type forget to add the characters actually driving forwards to fix their issues, leading the authors to keep adding more tragic and dark stuff into their characters' past to make the reader sympathize with them over time, without having any type of real character development, whether it be negative or positive to the story. It's just like my friend from high school. The more you try, the less return you're gonna get. Ultimately, a victim has to face some sort of reality that they can't just sit around and mope, and that they need to do something about their situation. There's nothing wrong with a comic like She's Hopeless, but if the whole point is the fact that she's hopeless, then why bother reading it if the title has told me all I need to know? You might be thinking, but surely there have to be good webtoons and stories that do this trope well, right? And you're absolutely correct. One of my personal favorite comics on Webtoon does this and does it extremely well in my opinion. In the comic Bastard, we follow Jin Sion and come to find out he is a victim at the hands of his father, a serial killer who plans to kill a lot of Jin's friends and people close to him. But rather than just sitting back and saying, woe is me, or acting like he's entitled to something because he's a victim, he makes a decision to actually do something about the situation he's found himself in, even though he didn't ask to be put there. Because while the initial shock of the trauma will ultimately draw a reader into the story, it is then the actions of the character in the situation to keep the readers engaged. How could you fix a victim like Serena? Personally, I would have rather started her story with her before her family died. She was happy, she got what she wanted when she wanted, she was spoiled, she was still a brat, obviously. Then her family dies, having Serena now be faced with having to run the family hotel and take on all of this responsibility she wasn't ready for. Having Serena start out unlikable could have been really refreshing if she, saw the errors in her ways and saw the negative ramifications it caused and how it negatively affected the people around her.
He's right. I should be ashamed of myself. But I never am.
But rather, we're presented with a victim we have to feel bad for, even though that person is unlikable, and we are given no other reason to root for her other than the fact that her life is kinda hard. If we watched her grow from a spoiled, entitled mean girl into a sharp businesswoman that could maybe use her sharpness for the actual benefit of the hotel she says she cares about so much, then we would have something to root for as an audience. You can still have an overbearing grandma and Iser, the husband she's married to, who is now rather a harsh business partner that she learns from as the story continues. The story as it is now is so exhausting to read and get behind because Serena doesn't do anything to help herself. We're just expected to root for her because she's had a kinda tough life. Do you remember that kid from school that would always complain that their allowance from their parents wasn't big enough? Meanwhile, you and your friends were lucky to find spare change for a sweet, sweet Circle K drink? Yeah, these victim webtoons play out just like that. You have no reason to root for this character because she's just such an unlikable bitch.
I just want to talk to him.
Why do you have a shotgun?
I just want to talk to him.
Even though there are side characters in a story, they are still people in a story that don't deserve to get treated so terribly. Just because a victim is a victim doesn't then give an excuse to act like a jerk to everyone and anyone. Editing Maddie here. I let curiosity get the better of me on this one, and I read one of the newest episodes of Serena at the time of recording this video. And basically it reiterates my point that these victim protagonists never get to see repercussions for their actions. Serena and Iser are in a compromising position, and Serena's all, I thought you hated me. And Iser's like, what? Why would I hate you? And Serena's like, oh, it's because I treated you like crap and threw temper tantrums, showing she does have the wherewithal to know and understand her actions are wrong. And Iser's just like, nah, I can never hate you. Mary Sue, people hating you? No way. Letting Serena off the hook for all of the vitriol and issues she caused him, never to show any type of, remorse for her actions. She's just free to treat people terribly, and then the side characters will let it go. This is not how real people act. Anyways, that was Editing Maddie. Back to the video. Is there a comic like Serena that does these things better than Serena? Yeah! Madame Outlaw is also another favorite of mine. While Serena is a slight historical drama, Madame Outlaw is a more realistic historical drama about a woman who had a family member who died tragically at the hands of her husband, who she is also arranged to be married to. She, just like Serena, is forced into a loveless marriage for the benefit and duty of her family. But rather than just sitting back and doing nothing but complaining about her circumstances, our protagonist Estelle does something about hers. Was it a good idea? You'll have to read the comic. Don't get me wrong. Being a victim is not a bad thing in a story. It can be a very effective tool or call to action for a character to have development when trauma does happen. It can define who they are to a certain extent, but it should never be the only reason they are who they are as a character. Victims mistreating others in a story and then it played off as them just having a hard day is not compelling, really lazy, and really unbelievable to read. But victims doing an action and actually progressing or regressing in a story for whatever arc they are to follow is engaging. Tropes like this exist for a reason, because when done well, the story is compelling and very memorable.